picture heaven, multitudes doing that kind of praising God. Ooh. Thank you, worship band singers, for doing that, for leading us into worship. I just have to tell you, God is preparing us. He's preparing messages. He's collaborating behind our backs with our spirits and our minds, getting us ready for coming to meet Him on Sabbath. I sat in on the adult study conversations about Genesis and studying Jacob, and I almost said, all right, we can just go home now because we just did the sermon. It was just the points that were brought out, not quite, I'm not going to be talking about Jacob, but the points brought out is the same message, the same core message that we're talking about this morning. And so I'm like, man, God, when He wants a message to come across, He makes sure it's planted here, 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 so we all come together on one page. So I'm excited about what He's going to do today. Love Does. That's a series that we're doing for the past couple months. This is the last couple weeks of it. And this morning, it's about love dives in. Love dives in. So I want to start with a story. As I mentioned, this series of lots of stories. And so this story is about a young couple who are getting married. Claudia and Tito. Well, young in heart. Young couple about ready to get married, but they didn't have much money. Hardly any at all. And weddings cost money if you're going to do like a normal kind of wedding. And after they'd sold their VW Bug, they had maybe about $3 a person they could spend on the wedding. Not a whole lot. So they decided to cut back on flowers. They got a bunch of balloons instead. They found a caterer who felt really sorry for them and gave them a lot of inexpensive food. The cake, though, was going to be the problem. As the girl was checking around, she found out that the cake cost as much as what they were spending on the entire wedding. So they're starting to panic a little bit. You've got to have cake. And then the guy remembers that he volunteers with Young Life, a ministry for high school students, and he remembered this particular kid whose dad was a baker. So he decided, okay, let's see what we can work out. So he talks to the kid, and he's like, hey, I've got $150. What kind of cake can you give me? The kid's like, oh my gosh, no problem. I can get you a cake 4 stories high. And so he's like, all right, cool, it's done. Let's do it. So the wedding happened. They go as weddings go, and they both said, I do. They ran down the aisle and headed for the reception. Now, the reception was in this swanky clubhouse in the swanky neighborhood because the guy's boss, he was a young attorney, this guy's boss lived in the neighborhood, and they got 2 free uses of the clubhouse. And so he generously gave it to this couple. So great clubhouse set. It's just inside their price range, free. They're good. So they arrive with all their balloons and bags, and they arrive, their caterer comes, and they brought lots of pasta salad to fill in the gaps. They drove into the parking lot, and as they were driving in, they saw that their high school friend had already started preparing the cake. He had arrived, and he was assembling the cake in the parking lot on an AV cart. And so the groom, as he's driving in, he's thinking, is that how it's supposed to be done? So, oh, well, all right. So he pulls in, and he watches as the guy assembles. He's already on the 3rd level, and they've got the pillars going. He's about ready to go up to the 4th, kind of like building a skyscraper, just needed a few, scaffolding and crane, but he was getting it. So the couple, they're walking to the entrance of the clubhouse, and as the groom's walking by, he happens to glance, and the guy's finished. He put the little topper on of the little bride and groom, and he's starting to wheel the AV cart to the reception. And the groom notices the wobbly back left wheel. And he's suddenly thinking, I don't think this is the way it's supposed to be done. And just after he thought that, sure enough, as predicted, in slow motion it unfolds. The cart hits a small rock and abruptly stops, but the upper levels of the cake didn't. And one after the other, the 3 top layers go splat onto the pavement. And so by this time, the bride and groom are there. They're looking down at their cake, the bride and groom ornament now face first into the cake pile. And they're just in stunned silence. What do you do? And there's dirt, there's asphalt, there's rocks. So the groom, knowing that the guests are about to arrive at any moment, pulls the young baker aside between some cars. No, he did not beat him up. He decided to come up with another plan. And so the guy goes, he scrapes up the cake, puts it in a bucket, and takes off in a Subaru. 30 minutes later, he comes back with a bucket of shards of cake in one bucket, and on the other bucket, freshly made icing. And he goes in the back room of the clubhouse, and he puts together the cake again and ices over it. And yes, they served this cake, dirt, gravel, asphalt, and all, to the guests. Now you think, as I'm reading the story, I'm going, oh my gosh, how many people broke their teeth on this wedding cake? How could they do this? And then, God has his way of bringing out these lessons. So isn't our lives kind of like that cake? Our lives. One moment we're looking so good, and then something happens. And suddenly we see our lives from the same perspective, on the ground, full of rocks, asphalt, not near the place we want to be. Maybe it's broken relationships, unwanted debris of repeated mistakes or choices, regrettable memories mixed in there with unused, unknown bits of skills, talents that sometimes don't feel like they amount to much, scattered hopes, scattered dreams, and it all just sometimes gets to looking like a big mess. But then we have the good news, the God that we worship, the God that we sing about. And when we go back, when we come here on Sabbath morning and we sing his praises and we read in Scripture, we are reminded about a God that no matter what it looks like, keeps scooping us up into his hands anyway. Dirt, debris, small bits and all, he keeps coming back for us, picking us up and finding ways to work with us, to use us, to bless us and bless others through us anyway. And when I actually look at Jesus' life, it's not even in any way kind of thing that he does. We were, as human beings, we were back in his day and are today his first choice. Always. Gritty, broken, mistakes, dirt, and all, human beings and all of our realness are exactly the kind of cake that Jesus seeks out, according to the accounts in the Bible. He sought out the gravel-scraping social outcasts. He sought out women who had broken relationships, broken reputations. He sought out men who had sand-encrusted stubbornness. He sought out dirt-dwelling tax collectors and solid as a rock religious people that he knew needed to be broken down and broken apart. He intentionally sought them out, not wanting a one to be sitting on the sidelines or left on the pavement. This was Jesus. This is our God. When he looks at you and I, when he looks at the people in our community around us, who sometimes we don't always feel very valuable, do we? We don't feel very used. We feel underused, unwanted, ill-equipped for the tasks that are before us, whether it's work or the relationships or the struggles that we're facing. And yet he looks at us and he sees and highlights to us what others miss. That's worth and beauty and potential and possibility, no matter how young or old, how perfect or imperfect you are. This is what he sees, and he seeks us out, he embraces us, he delights in us, and he serves us up anyway. To become like his ancient followers today, to join him in his crucial, world-changing, love, bless, serve, restore lives kind of mission on earth. I was going through a rough patch several years ago where I really did feel like that cake on the pavement where pieces of me were strewn about and I had bits of me here and there. And I didn't feel good. I was still working. I had family. I had friends. I had life. But I knew I was not in the center or the sweet spot of God's calling or purpose. And I wasn't even sure if I had anything of value that God would want to use anymore. I felt like my purpose, whatever it had been, had already been used up, had already happened. It was done. That was it. The party was over. And I thought maybe the rest of my days are just going to be pavement dwelling. And I don't know where you guys are in your life. I think we all visit those places in our life, not just once, but different times in different ways. Pieces of our lives left out there. Whether it's a piece of you because of a torn up marriage, a lost job, rock bottom finances, struggles with health crisis or temptation or struggles or trials, or maybe it's just an unknown emptiness that doesn't seem to be filled, a restlessness. And it leaves our souls feeling like shards of what it should be or could be. And it's not a good feeling. And in those times, especially, we wonder what God's going to do about it. Can he do anything about it? Does he want to do anything about it anymore? What am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do about it? And will it make any difference? And so that's where I was. And I happened to be in my studies. I happened to be studying the fruit of the Spirit, which in my mind had absolutely nothing to do, totally unrelated with what I was struggling with. But I, was putting myself, wanting to learn, wanting to be in relationship with Jesus. And I was learning, and I was going along and journaling about my life on the sidelines. And then in the midst of what I thought was irrelevant, God showed up. God showed up and whispered some truth about his love and about my life. And I think that's how God rolls. I don't know about you, but it seems like I never know when he's going to speak. Or maybe he's always speaking and I never know when my ears are going to actually tune in the way they need to be. So I think the best thing I know to do is just keep showing up. Keep showing up with your ears open and your eyes open, ready for the day when that particular verse or story or point is going to hit. And maybe where he'll speak in a way that I can hear, or I'll hear in the way he's been trying to speak all along. So I'm studying about the fruit of the Spirit, and it particularly was about peace. And so the study where I was looking at Mark 6 and same story in John 6, the story of feeding the 5,000. Story you know so well, right? And as I'm trying to figure out, okay, what does this have to do with peace in my life? God broke in intent to talk to me about a different kind of peace. Not the fruit of the Spirit peace, but the pieces of my life. And so perhaps fast forwarding, it's wanting to be shared. He's wanting me to share because of the pieces of your life too. That I think perhaps we all can realize that no matter what life looks like on the pavement, there's a party going on inside. And he wants us to get from the pavement to the party. And so I want you to tune in to Mark. Mark 6. Mark chapter 6. Verses 30 through 44. Mark 6, verse 30 through 44. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. And then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said, Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and let's get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a very remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, You give them something to eat. They said to him, Well, that would take 8 months of a man's wages. Are we really to go out, spend that much on bread, and give it to them to eat? Well, how many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said, 5. Hey, and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish, and the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. All right, we know this story, right? So first, what happens? God makes them aware of their need by asking questions. Verse 37, Jesus says, you give them something to eat. Begs a question, where are you going to get food? In John 6:5, Jesus actually asked the questions, the same story, where are you going to buy bread for these people to eat? When he realizes they're hungry, he asks the question, where are you going to get the food? He asks a question. Either way, in Mark or John, there's a prompting of Jesus for his disciples to start reflecting, to start digging deeper. What am I supposed to do? And I think about the questions that we face when we feel like our lives are in pieces and we're not sure what to do. Those questions start stirring, whether it's in a relationship or a struggle or a temptation or your job or what have you. The questions of how is this, what am I supposed to do? Why is this happening? When is a solution going to come? The stirrings that are happening in your soul, the restlessness, the frustrations in our lives, I believe God uses those to prompt reflection, to prompt a stirring and a restlessness for a purpose. And just like Jesus did with the disciples here in Mark and in John, he wanted them to become acutely aware, just like he wants us to be acutely aware of our needs, of where we are in life, where we aren't in life, of what we long for, the desire for our hearts. What do we hope will come out of a God encounter, a God miracle in our life? So the first thing is God makes them aware. The second thing in this story, as you're going along, you find in verse 38, how many loaves do you have? He asked, go and see. So when they're like, we can't think of a solution, we can't find anything, he's like, well, what do you have? How many loaves do you have? And then Jesus takes whatever they have to offer. He wants to know, what do you have to offer? What do you have? Go and see. And so in Mark, it says that they found 5 loaves and 2 fish. In John, when you look in John, it shows Andrew coming back after his questing, and he brings back scraps from a child. Now, I find that very interesting, that a child was the only one who had anything to offer. A child. I can just see the disciples searching among the people, 5,000 people on the hillside. You got anything? You know, we're going to do a buffet lunch for 5,000 people. Do you might have any kind of food we can contribute to this potluck? And so they're looking, and maybe there were adults who had thought ahead. I bet there were among 5,000. There's going to be some Charleses and some Reggies among them who plan ahead. And so they're like, okay, so let's make sure we have the lunch, and I have a loaf of bread, but the disciples are asking it, why would I give that up? I mean, that's not going to help 5,000 people. And so I'm going to be hungry later. I better just, if I give that up, then I'm not going to get anything. So I'll just hang on to it. But this child operated like most children do. You need food? Here, have mine. Here, take it. Doesn't stop to calculate the logic of it. Doesn't stop to think, I might be hungry later, so I better keep it. He gives. He's excited to give. He wants to contribute to help make something happen, believing instead of doubting. Believing that whatever he gives will make a difference. Isn't that what we learn as children? If everyone contributes, then everything works better together. We all play a part. And so Andrew finds this child, finds the scraps, and brings it to Jesus. Now there are 2 things, as I'm studying this, there's 2 things that hit my brain. Okay, so first of all, was Jesus asked the disciples to go and find what you have. And whether you're in a hurting relationship, you have an empty bank account, an unfulfilling job, a struggle, a trial, a temptation, Jesus might be asking you today, What have you already tried? I need to know what you've tried. What solutions are you thinking about? What resources, what ideas, what skills have you already tapped into? What areas are you getting stuck? What do you have to work with? If it's dealing with a purpose or your passion or trying to find direction in your life, God could be asking, what do you know about yourself? What abilities do you have? What skills, what gifts, what strengths? You don't know? Well, find out. Go and find out. What is that perfect job? What would that be like? What is that ministry that you enjoy doing? What don't you enjoy doing? What do you have? Go and see. And I just have to do a small little advertisement right here. If you're one of those that don't know what you have, you don't know what your skills are, you don't know what your gifts are, you're not sure what your passions or your purpose is, can I just say there's a workshop called Discover the Treasure of You. And that is going to be taking place as soon as we have 10 people signing up. We had 10 people already take that workshop, and we're thrilled and blessed, thank God, through it. And so it is waiting for you. And I do believe that if Jesus was feeding 5,000 purpose-hungry souls, he would have referred them to the Discover the Treasure of You workshop. So we already have 4 people signed up. We need 6 more. Once we have those 6, we will be doing a workshop to help you know what you have in your hands when God says, go find out what you have and bring it to me. The bring it to me part, that's the part when I was studying this and it hit me. The bringing to Jesus part was the part that stuck with me. It was the part that said it wasn't about information gathering. It's about coming to Jesus. It's not about studying to learn more facts. It was about getting to the heart and the hands of Jesus. That's where we find our solutions. That's where we can move forward. That's where we go from hungry to satisfied. We go from empty to filled. We go from scarcity to abundance, physically, emotionally, spiritually, when we look at what we have and we bring it to Jesus. And so as I was reading this, I'm thinking, it was like one of those times where the ancient and the present kind of meld together. And I saw the disciples going through the crowd say, hey, I found some bread. Can you use, just a couple scraps, but can you use this? And another one, I found some fish heads. Can you use the fish heads? Snacks, maybe? And how does this fit in? And I think about you and I in our lives, and we say, hey, I've got this idea. It's an idea for ministry, maybe to help people in our community. Can you use it? I don't know if it's for us, for someone else, but here you take it. Maybe it's a dream you've had since you were a kid, and you're like, I don't know what this is for, but I've had it forever. Maybe it's a passion you really enjoy, but how does it fit in? Here, Jesus, I'm bringing this to you. Maybe it's a weird skill that you have. And you think, well, I really enjoy it, but what the heck am I supposed to do with this? Bring it to Jesus. Maybe you're struggling with a habit that you just can't seem to break and it's not very pretty. Bring it to Jesus. Because maybe it can be, hey, Jesus, maybe you can retrofit this somehow. You can make it work on a different angle so I'll finally get it. Maybe you're thinking about a certain counselor. You're not sure if they're the right one. Here it is, Jesus. Let me know. Give me peace. I have a portion of my paycheck. I have an hour on my schedule. Can you use it, God? Does it work with your plan? Will it help somehow move forward a slice of purpose that we're called here together for or out in our community? I don't know. Jesus said, go and see. And so the disciples went and saw, and then they brought it back to Jesus. And suddenly, when I was in the midst of that, when I was trying to figure out if there was any purpose left in my life, any value, any direction that I was supposed to be knowing about, I suddenly realized what I was supposed to do. And maybe it's a thought of what we all can do. When we're waiting for an answer, a direction, when we have questions and struggles, maybe what we're supposed to do as we love and follow after Jesus is dive in. Dive in with our trust. Trusting that God has allowed this discomfort in our lives, this unrest, this stirring of the mind, the bringing of the questions. He's allowed it because he's already on the move, preparing the way for his plan, his purpose, his miracle to manifest themselves in the right way, in the right time in your life. So he says, will you trust me on this? Those questions I'm asking, I'm stirring, I'm allowing the unrest, this isn't right kind of feelings because I have a plan here. So dive in. Dive in with your trust. And dive in with action. And bring whatever you have, the scraps, the questions, the struggles, the unknowns, the little bits, the barely hanging ons, the dreams, the ideas, the skills, bring them to me, Jesus says. Bring them to me because I know what to do with them. And I know what to do with you in your life, in your situation. And as we just read in Mark, we know what happened when the disciples brought their scraps to Jesus, right? Well, the first thing he did, he commanded them to sit down. He commanded them to sit down, dive in, then rest. Dive in, then rest. Rest in me. And I love how Mark gives that little detail of green grass. Why didn't he just say they sat down in the grass? He commanded them to sit down in the green grass. Green is verdant. It is alive. It is spring. It is new life. It is refreshment to lie down in green grass. So sit down, let go, rest in me, in my presence, trusting my provision. And in John, it makes the point that he only fed those who were willing to be seated. And then God did what he does best. As he says in Ephesians 3:20, he gave them immeasurably more than they could have ever asked for, than we could ever ask for or imagine. Ephesians 3:20, he gives more, immeasurably more than they could ask or imagine. And he longs to do the same for you and I and for our community. Overflowing generosity at the hands of God. I realized that wasn't just a plan for my life then. I started doing that. I started taking whatever idea that I had, whatever scrap of ability or thought or dream, I gave it to God. And I would journal it and say, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, but here it is, so you let me know. And I think if we operate like that, maybe that's what followers of Jesus, if we could get that kind of pattern in our life every day, not just in crisis mode, but every day. It's a sum of how we could live in hard times and happy times, diving in, trusting, and bringing whatever we have, whatever we find, what we know, what we don't know, bringing it all to him, and then sitting and waiting in his presence, eyes and ears open for his way to supply the needs, to use us and the needs around us. And he will make miracles happen in our lives, in our souls, in our spirits, in our relationships, in our jobs. He will provide. Ephesians says that abundantly more than we could ask or imagine. He will make a way where there seems to be no way. And I think he does that for us in our lives as we seek him as followers, and he does it for those he sends us to. Our community, our neighbors, our coworkers, our teachers, our classmates. He sends us, and God knows what they need, and he's eager to use whatever we have to offer, our time, our money, ourselves, as little as it seems. He takes all of it into his hands, and he serves us up to meet needs, to fill souls, to satisfy hungers, to bring life and joy to those around us. Now, unlike the story, the cool thing is that God doesn't just ice over the grit in our lives. He doesn't just ice over the struggles or the questions or the faults or the failures like the young baker did, but instead he uses us in spite of the grit and faults and failures and struggles and transforms those to becoming a whole brand new kind of tasting cake. What we have to do is decide, do we want to move from the sidelines to the field? Do we want to move from the parking lot to the party? We can't just do that by believing all the right stuff or by talking about all the right stuff anymore. Jesus said he will help us to start doing the right stuff because that's what love does. It dives in. What Jesus is all about, he calls people who can't figure out, like me, how to open a plastic bag to be his hands. And he calls people who seem to trip up every day to be his feet. And he calls people who can't seem to make a screw go in right or stack a cake properly. He calls them and us to build a kingdom. And if we're willing and say yes, and we put our lives and all that we have, small, big, in between, into his hands, he will serve us up, rocks, small bits of asphalt, and all. I know we had cake last week at Easter time, but I wanted to serve cake again today. Because I want it to be, as you take a bite, I want it to be a tangible imprint on your hearts and in your minds. But you're going to notice over there, there's a bunch of cakes. Christina, thank you so much for putting into cups. It is not nicely cut pieces of beautiful cake. It is scraps and chunks and pieces of cake. And you might even eat a little bit of grit in there because we sprinkled a little bit of dirt in the cake. So eat that. Now, she really wanted to do that, but we went with Oreos instead. So you have Oreo dirt. So I want you to know, though, as you take a bite of each cake, just remember that whatever scraps you have, whatever bits and pieces, whatever, if you are feeling like you're not sure where God wants you or has you, remember, he says, bring to me, and we'll bring sweetness back to your life as you walk with me. But I want you to know you can't take a cup of cake unless you take a paper that's on there about all the ways in which, if you are not in the process or not participating or not involved in bringing to God your talents and your skills for ministry purposes here at Inspire or out in our community, there are a plethora of opportunities where God says, you know what, I can use that. I can use you. I can use this. I can use whatever you have to offer. And those are ideas and ways to get involved, and I hope you take them and dive in, because that's what love does, is it dives in, and God will continue to serve us up in here and beyond our walls to make life much more tasty and deep and real when connected with him. Stand with me before we eat cake. We didn't have the milk, so no. All right, God, thank you. Thank you so much for being a God who left so many imprints on our earth and on our hearts, stories and encounters with you that we can reflect upon and realize as you talk to us today, as you whisper those same things to us today, that you are a God who seeks us out, that you can be trusted with all our scraps, all our questions, all our struggles, all our temptations, all our what ifs, the bits and pieces of us we're not sure what to do with. You will take them. And just like with the disciples, you overflow with generosity. When you get us in your hands, generosity overflows. And we want to be your overflow to our world, to each other, and to those you send us to. So as we eat cake, remind us with each bite of your sweetness in our lives, and that you can make the difference from scraps to whole. We thank you. In your name, amen.
Lost or saved, find their way at the sound of your great name. All condemned Jesus.